Hello, hi, it's Mari. I'm coming to you guys again off the dome. I think this is going to be a bit more of a common occurrence, but today I wanted to talk to you guys about how I became an extrovert as somebody who grew up extremely introverted with like social phobia, horrible social anxiety, and someone who considered herself agoraphobic at some point in my life. I was actually diagnosed with social phobia in college, and here I am, and a lot of people have a hard time believing that about me, but it's true. I used to be very introverted. I used to hate having conversations with random people outside. I hated a lot of things, and I've changed and grown a lot from that person I used to be, and my life has changed so much for the better. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about that, because oftentimes I'll talk about how I made new friends somewhere, or I tried something new, or I traveled somewhere alone, and I'll get flooded with comments saying like, oh, like I wish I could be like that, but I have social anxiety, I'm A, B, C, list all the reasons why you can't also be the same way. And I just know that that's bullshit, because I used to be that person. I used to think that I couldn't do it, and I had to really work to be this person that I am today. So I had a bit of a hard childhood. I would say that I was along one of those people that would get bullied rather frequently. People did not like me. People found me rather annoying. That's not very surprising, is it? But due to that, I had this like rage and anger inside of me, and I also found it entirely unproductive to connect with people that I was never going to see again. So if somebody started talking to me at the grocery store or something, I hated that, because why do I need to entertain you when I'm never going to see you again? That's just kind of the mindset that I had. I also was deeply afraid of people that I didn't know, strangers. I was scared of what they could do to me, how they could hurt me, how I could humiliate myself, all of the above. When I lived in Portland, I was actually so agoraphobic that I felt like I could not leave my house, period. I stayed inside for so long, it was giving yellow wallpaper vibes. I was miserable. At the time, I was in a very long relationship of over 3.5 years, and I had moved out of state with this person, and I had completely isolated myself. I had no friends, I barely talked to my family, and I didn't have it in me to make new friends at all. I wasn't going outside. I was so afraid of people. I always tell people now that I became so deeply alone that I had no choice but to change. I had no choice but to force myself into uncomfortable situations. Otherwise, it was going to kill me. The loneliness was going to kill me. And I was living with that guy that I was in a relationship with, and I had never felt so alone. I wasn't seen for who I am. I don't think he really loved me at all. And I had such low self-esteem. I was extremely alone. And in many ways, my community that I had of people online, you guys were the only people that I had. That was the only social interaction I was getting, was with strangers online, which is just simply not good for you or your psyche, for anyone's psyche. And I realized being in that relationship that it is toxic and impossible to expect one person to meet all your needs. It's not possible, and it's going to strain any relationship. And after all the pain that I experienced in that relationship, I recognized that in order to heal, I needed to change, and I needed to make new friends, meet new people, and find community. So I moved back home with my parents after that breakup ended, so I was living in Vegas, and again, I still had no fucking friends. I was so deeply alone. I was living somewhere that I didn't want to be, drowning in many ways. I was struggling financially, all these different things, and I had no source, no backing to my confidence. I couldn't be confident. There was nothing to draw that confidence from, because I had nothing. I had nothing. And I was in the lowest of lows in my life. And at that point, meeting new people and putting myself in those situations, it made it feel like my skin was on fire. It was incredibly difficult. And I need to stress that point, that I felt like I was dying when I would force myself into situations where I had to be around people. I actively avoided even eating at a restaurant because I did not want to be around people. I think it's important to note as well that in college or when I was working a regular job where I was going in and forced to meet people, the same people over and over again every day, it was a lot easier for me to make connections and make friends, but I never learned the skill of meeting people outside of that. And to me, like, it seemed like this impossible feat to find friendships as an adult. At that point, it felt like everybody already had friends that they have had for a lifetime and that they didn't want to expand their circle, or that people just wouldn't like me. But I realized that as long as I thought people wouldn't like me, that's the only reality that would manifest for me. If I thought that everybody was going to think I'm weird or cringy or not like me, that's exactly the version of me that I was going to put out when I went and tried to become friends with people. So even if it was fake, from a fake place, I had to go in with the mentality that I just had to be myself and that the right people would enjoy my company and like me for who I am. So on a whim, during the holidays when Arissa was visiting my parents' house where I was living at the time, she mentioned that she was going on a trip with her friends to Joshua Tree. And still at this point I had no friends, and I thought, you know what, why don't I kind of invite myself to this? I asked her, can I come? Because to me I thought, you know, it's already hard enough as it is to meet people and make friends and be brave in that way, but if I had Arissa with me, I know that it would be exponentially easier. So I invite myself to that. Her friends say that it's fine and she's happy to have me there, and I go and meet all of her friends. Did that go well? No. And that's gonna be the theme here for a while, is that I tried over and over and over again, and I was rejected a lot. I was not fun to be around. I had crippling anxiety, so a lot of the times I would go mute and I wouldn't contribute anything to any conversations or have any fun. I was deeply uncomfortable, but that was a process that I had to take over and over and over again until it stopped feeling like my skin was on fire every time. Outside of hanging out with people in that way, with like Arissa's friends, I started opening myself up mentally to connections outside of long-term connections. So I would be at the gas station, places that I would frequent. I would go to the gas station every morning and pick up a caffeinated beverage. And I started creating small talk with the woman that works at the register. And I would ask her name, I would ask her about her day, and it became a daily thing where I would look forward to seeing her and she would look forward to seeing me, and it became a genuine friendship. And like I mentioned before, that was a kind of connection that I never even considered as valuable, which is really sad. You know, I'm somebody who worked in customer service, and being on the other side of it, you know, I was open to connections like that. So coming out of my anxiety and not seeing connecting with them as some kind of weird burden, conversing with them as some kind of weird burden, really changed a lot for me. And it was also a really easy way for me to get exposure therapy and connect with people in general. So I became friends with pretty much everybody that lived outside of the apartment that I was staying at when I was couch surfing in California. You know, I would tell them about trips that I was going on. I would come back and show them pictures. They were invested in my life. I would talk to them about their kids, all this stuff, right? Somebody at Target would help me, and that sort of thing fed me and those social interactions opened up this avenue of realization where I understood finally that that is where community came from. I yearned for community for a long time, and I didn't realize that it was available to me all along and that it was so easy to find. I just had to go and get it and be open to connections, because I wasn't, because of my own fear and anxiety. I started really valuing asking people their names. Whether it be the first and last time that I saw this person, if I had a nice conversation with a stranger, I would ask them their name. And I feel like getting their name humanized them every time. I would introduce myself and ask them their name, and it how can I explain this? It added depth to our connection, and if I ever saw them again, I would remember it. I made it a point. I became really good with names. I think that was huge for me. That was a huge part of me overcoming my social anxiety. I would also become friends with my neighbors. If I felt any inkling of anxiety, I would force myself to do the opposite of what my fear was telling me to do. If I saw a neighbor, I would say hi, when before I would completely avoid them because I was scared. I started remembering their names, telling them little things about my day, even if it seemed awkward, even if it seemed useless because I may never see them again. I started connecting with the people around me that I never considered as possible friends. You know, if I was hanging out at my apartment hot tub and somebody happened to be there, instead of just being on my phone the whole time, I would start a conversation with them. Was I always welcomed? No. And that's part of like rejection therapy, right? But you'd be surprised, more often than not, people are open to conversing with you, and it created so many friendships for me. And little by little, with each intentional act, my social anxiety got better. It really did. As I used to consider myself an introvert, I quickly became the extroverted friend. I became the friend that had no problem talking to anyone outside. Then, I moved to my own apartment, finally, at some point. This happened this last January. I joined jiu-jitsu. I started taking classes. So now I have a place that I cyclically go to on a regular basis, seeing the same people over and over again. That expanded my friendships significantly as well. I was so anxious at first. I was so anxious, even despite having gotten better about my social anxiety, because prior I would have never even put myself in that situation. I would have never gone out and taken classes because I would have been too scared. So I had already come a long way doing that, but I quickly became friends with everyone at jiu-jitsu. And again, that was like an extreme form of exposure therapy, and it was so worth it to me. It gave me that sense of community that I deeply craved, and it got me to a point where I felt as though I had an adequate enough support system, a strong support system at that, for me to enter a new relationship and be confident that I wouldn't be relying on one person to meet all my needs. So today, now, I have made friends again at the apartment pool. The other day I was swimming at the apartment pool, and 3 guys came into the hot tub while I was there and started talking to me. And after we had a conversation, I got all their names, I decided to go into the pool after, and they ended up following me in there, and I was talking to one of them, and he said, we talk every night about going into the pool after the hot tub, and we never do it. So when I saw you do it and go into the pool after the hot tub, I took it as my sign, and they all followed me into the pool. And, I'm a woman, I'm 5 foot. Typically something like that would have scared the shit out of me, but it was such a gift. It was such a gift. We had so much fun, and I would bump into those same guys pretty frequently. I would go to the pool and see them, and we started playing together at the pool. I would teach them how to flip off the edge, do a little dive here and there. We would swim together and play like we were kids, and they were like exchange students from India. We would talk about their summer plans, visiting back home. We would talk about politics. We would really talk about anything. In a matter of a year or two, I completely turned my life around, my social anxiety around, and I became a completely different person out of the deep, deep loneliness that I had gotten myself into by isolating myself for so long. It all came from being aware of the part of me that I wanted to change, being able to look at that social anxiety and realize that if I did nothing to change this is who I'm going to be. That part of me is going to calcify and become me. And I didn't want to let that become of me. I wanted to change. I'd always admired extroverted, sociable people. I didn't want to be an antisocial person that hated everyone. So I had to make the intentional choice that despite my discomfort, I would have to push through and change. And I believed with my whole heart that I could. And I was right. And in the grand scheme of things, a year, 2 years is nothing. And the discomfort I experienced was so short in the grand scheme of things. And now that I'm at this end point where I'm getting praise all the time for how sociable I am, for how unafraid I am of social interactions and connections, I want to share that with you guys because, again, with those comments that I get of people telling me they could never be like that, I was you. I was you at one point, and I need you guys to know that it is so possible for you to do the same thing. It really is, and I believe that with my whole heart. It might be hard at first. It will be hard at first. It literally felt like my skin was on fire. I cried so many times after being rejected by large groups of people. Yet here I am, right? My life is full of friendships. I have the community that I looked for so long, and I am incredibly happy. I am in a great place in life, and I know for a fact that if I didn't take the initiative and to intentionally change that part of myself, I wouldn't be where I am today. I also think with my career path, right? Social media is my career path. I get recognized pretty regularly. And in the beginning times, that used to make me so anxious, guys. Like, so anxious. Because what if you guys caught me on a bad day and I was a bitch? What if? I had thoughts like that. What if I looked bad? This and that. After all of this, like, soul searching and changing as a person, I literally do not give a fuck anymore. I could have just popped a pimple, be in my boxers, have bedhead. I do not care. I will meet anyone with a smile on my face, and I really think it is a blessing to be able to meet any of you guys. If you guys ever see me out in public, you guys are so welcome to come say hi to me. I would love for you guys to come do that. Truly, like, it is something that makes me so happy to connect with you guys. Yeah, I think it was truly like such a valuable change in my life, and a fitting one at that for my career, because people always say like, oh, I met so-and-so and they were so mean. I never want to meet somebody that has admired me or supported me in any sort of way and make them feel like that. Make them feel worse for having met me. I never want people to feel like that, and that was another reason outside of wanting to overcome loneliness, was that I want to be able to connect with the people who support me, which is you guys. So it means a lot to me to have been able to make that personal growth. And I also want those of you guys who struggle in the same way to know that it is possible to change, right? I told you guys I was literally diagnosed with a social phobia by a psychiatrist at one point. There's no shot I would keep that diagnosis now. I'm really proud of how far I've come and the knowledge that I gained through this, and having proved to myself that with the right intentions, you can change. You can really change yourself. I want to share that with you guys and let it be known that change is possible. Another thing is that I became obsessed with controlled suffering. That's like suffering where you have control of it, right? It's not an external force causing you suffering. You're choosing to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation for one reason or another. And that was oftentimes me putting myself in uncomfortable social situations. But during this time as well, I was doing like not exactly cold plunges, but like I would go swimming in cold water. I would stay in uncomfortable situations like that, or like go on extremely hard hikes to prove to myself that I can do things. I can do hard things. Anything is possible for me. I can push myself through things that I thought were too hard for me before. And with the cold water, that was to teach my nervous system that I am in control, and that even though everything in my body is telling me that I'm gonna die, this water is so cold, I need to get out of there, that I could overcome that mental feeling and be above that, which again helps with overcoming that horrible feeling of anxiety that you feel from social anxiety. So through all of everything, that was another essential part of me changing, was to put myself in those states of controlled suffering that helped me know that I can overcome things, and to reset my nervous system in that way that, you know, maybe my nervous system is overreacting, and while listening to your body is really important, sometimes your body lies to you. You can cognitively make the decision to stay or leave, and that can change the outcome of your mental durability, your mental strength. I might make another video on this eventually. Again, when it's off the dome, like I feel like I just kind of forget to say things that I want to say sometimes, but I think, you know, most of the valuable things are here in this video. So I really hope this can be of help to you guys. Even if it helps one person, that would be really cool. Once again, I just want to let you guys know that I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you guys from the bottom of my heart. If you ever see me out in the wild, please say hi. Would love to meet you guys. It's always welcomed. And yeah, I hope you guys have a super sparkly rest of your week. And I will catch you guys next time. But that is the end of this video. Is Tachi in frame? I wouldn't know it. But yeah. I love you guys. Johnny! I keep, like, every time I film, I recognize that having this statue of the star with the face on it messes up the focus of my video, because the camera keeps registering it as a face and like focusing on that instead of my own, and yet I never move it, so I'm gonna move it this time. Oh, she's gorgeous though, isn't it? So cold.